Well, good evening and good morning, and thank you for joining. We have today the second session, and very quickly, I'm not going to share any screens because we have lost time, but just to say today's session is focused around the NEP document that was recently issued. It's by the government and it's a policy document. It has many implications for educationalists at all levels, and it has many opportunities for entrepreneurs. Hosting this event and moderating is our dear friend and esteemed colleague Satish Jha, who is totally familiar across geographies, USA and India, totally familiar across roles, investments, and founding and operating, as well as totally familiar with policy making in the education sector. Over to you, Satish, to introduce our illustrious speakers and take it from here.
Thank you very much, Harry. Appreciate very much a great introduction and the way you were steering the trial, SIG, education SIG particularly. And welcome my wonderful panelists, and start with introducing Dr. Anup Singh. He leads NIRMA University. Dr. Rahul, he's based in Hyderabad, and he runs Boxer University. I find it very difficult to name that. It's a new name. It's apparently global, and then he's running their management. And Professor Sanjay Singh, who is teaching at IIM Ahmedabad. He's from IIM Calcutta himself, and he is into the field of information technology, systems strategy, and looking at supporting institutions that will shape this, face or rather future of the nation. I would like to start with saying that great nations have had great higher education systems. In Europe, in the earlier phase when it became the wheel, or rather the engine of the world, education system, Oxford, Cambridge, and other universities all across Europe, they played a huge role in that. American universities in the past 200 years have played a major role in making America the hub of innovation, technology. 95% gets developed in America, at least in information technology space. And I learned it step by step over the past 25 years. No matter how hard people tried, in the end, every conference you have, 90% plus representation of new technology came from America in the past 25 years. Something must be happening. India has an opportunity now, and NEP is one step in that direction, how to shape our future of higher education now. And when I think of higher education, I think we all might agree that the first flush of that change was when IITs and IIMs were formed, and they still remain huge contributor to where India is today and India's future. IITs and IIMs, they get the best of the students in the country. Second was when we privatized universities about 20 years ago. And then I remember the most important part was there was so much excitement in the investment sector. One gentleman told me, I have 4 cents, so I have founded 4 universities. It became that simple. You have 4 cents, you found 4 universities. Now we have close to 1,000 universities in India. And we have to, in the light of the new education policy, think in terms of how do we create the future of India's education, higher education as such. How do you plan for that? I will start with Dr. Anup Singh because he has been engaged in looking at a large institution, very successful one. NIRMA has been known as someone that was like David that picked the Goliath of Hindustan Lever. And in everything it does, it basically brings in that perspective. Start small and become the example of how to succeed. Dr. Anup Singh, I would like to ask you, when you look at your experience of running NIRMA and look at the future of education from an NEP point of view, what are the 3 key most important aspects that immediately start striking your mind?
Oh, good morning and good evening. Thank you very much. See, we are a country which is at the verge of achieving greatness, but something is stopping us. So 3 things are very important. One is, as you rightly said, great education. Second is a great economy. And third is a great strategic power. So since the topic is education, education is the fulcrum on which all competencies can be mapped. So far, Indian education has been concerned. We we were in a very retrograde situation where a host of things were missing. Most important was that there was lack of entrepreneurship and innovation. That was one. The second one was that our education was not experiential, and it was not having a connect with the industry. And the third one was that our faculty were disempowered. They didn't have power to teach in the classroom what they wanted to teach. Their international exposure was less, and they were not having sufficient time to do research. The new education policy tries to address these issues. That look, our education has to be experiential and at par with the best in the world, particularly Western Europe and Northern America. And secondly, there is much more emphasis on startup, entrepreneurship, and innovation. And finally, we are taking faculty very seriously because it is now being recognized. If we want to have a great educational system, it is not possible without having great teachers, right? And this is why the Prime Minister of India said, "Achhe Shikshak, Achhi Shiksha," good teachers and therefore good education, right? So these are the three things which I think are very important. Let us have good teachers, let them give opportunity, and let there be entrepreneurship and innovation among the students.
Thank you very much. Let me get Rahul in. Rahul, you bring in a global experience and you have been looking at a global brand of university in India. What are the three main points that you come across as your key concerns when you look at creating institution of the future, which you're trying to?
Well, if you look at international education in India, and we are looking at improving the Indian education ecosystem, mainly what I have found, which is of paramount importance, is first of all technological implementation. Of course, AI, machine learning, robotics, blockchain, all these high-end technologies need to be implemented across disciplines, not just restricted to engineering or so-called technical fields, but across other areas and streams. That is very important. Secondly, as Dr. Anu rightly mentioned, the internationality approach, and of course bringing quality into the teaching and delivery. Now, bringing foreign faculty in India will not solve the problem, but training faculty over the world, around the world, especially in India, on so-called Western practices and implementing them and adjusting them within the Indian ecosystem can really, really help improving multiple dimensions, such as case study-based teaching, for example. So it can really give you that edge. And obviously, the overall industry connect can bring about a whole hemisphere. Now, when we talk about industry connect, we are not just talking about the concept of placements. We are talking about a concept of really building a connect on project base and building a connect on delivering products. So that is how it really interlinks with the technological fields. Students training themselves in multiple dimensions, such as programming languages, will not help until and unless they are able to really do real life and, of course, the needed projects and the need of the hour. And that we'll see in due time. Now the skill sets are growing all over the world, and hopefully, obviously, will come across rightly.
Thank you very much, and I'll take a supplementary on that. Dr. Sanjay, let me get back to you. Do I see you here? I don't see you. Are you there?
I am there. I am there.
Okay. You were at a great institution called Ahmedabad. It has been a premier institution of India. It gets finance students. You end up recruiting finance faculty. Let me ask you, when you look at the future of education in the light of the new NEP, rather NEP, which has an N as a new part of it anyway, rather it's new NEP. What are the questions that come to your mind in terms of future of education in the next 25 years?
Okay.
Sitting at already the apex of quality from India's point of view.
Thank you. The experience that I share comes not necessarily only from IIM Ahmedabad, but also many other universities and education institutions with whom I work very closely. I do work very closely with Dr. Singh's Nirma Institute of Management also, and that's really one of the best managed universities that I have seen. But not all universities are working maybe in the way Dr. Singh is managing his university. Therefore, when I look at the new policy, see, I feel that all good intents get lost somewhere in implementation. So policy wise, if you look at it, it's a wonderful piece, no doubt about that. It's really much, much better than what we were doing so far. However, I have hesitation and I want to see how it gets implemented. And some of the avenues where I would like to keep my tab on is, let me bring out from three perspectives. The people who manage education institutions, that's one. The people who deliver in the classrooms that Dr. Singh has already talked about, and maybe I will add some more to that. And third is the main part of that process, the students. These are the three things I think we have to focus on. For example, just to give you in brief, when we talk of autonomy to education institutions and new education policy talks about it, this autonomy is for whom? Is it for the board of the institution? Is it for, and especially talking about public institutions like IITs and IIMs, is it for the board? Is it for the head of the institutions? Maybe it may be director or whosoever, or is it for the faculty? Quite often we feel that the autonomy to institution means autonomy to faculty also, but it may not be the same. That's the first thing that I want to bring out. And therefore, sometimes it may so happen that in an environment that gets created, faculty may not flower enough. They may not bring out the best, because there are not many opportunities. And that happens especially because the processes are not created properly in those education institutions. That's one. Second is about students. And very briefly, I would like to mention, many students apply to me for internship. And many of them are from IITs. Some of them are from other engineering institutions also. And in their application, I would say 90% of them write that they see themselves as budding managers. A student in second year of engineering or third year of engineering writes to me that he sees himself or herself as a budding manager, and they don't have any interest in engineering. Now, I'm surprised. If you didn't have any interest in engineering, why did you go for that subject? Why did you study that? Is it peer pressure? Is it parental pressure? Or is it that was one way to take maybe another step? Therefore, the second question is, are the students who are coming for higher education, are they actually genuinely interested in education or not? Or do they see degree as a path to some career? Are they enjoying their learning or not? And third, I am with the important point, and I would share my views with Dr. Singh and Dr. Raul, is about the faculty training. But I not only look at faculty training, that's important, the two of them have talked about it. I also want to understand the faculty evaluation. That's very important. How do you evaluate and how do you differentiate between a good faculty and not so good faculty? And how do you ensure that the potential gets used properly in the organization? So these are three things that are very important as far as I am concerned. There are a few other points that we can take later as part of our discussion.
Thank you very much. And let me get to Anup. Anup, let me ask you, you're a great institution like Sanjay also verified. Now you think of the next stages in 25 years. What changes do you want to make to create an environment where there's excellence in terms of learning for both R&D environment and the students? What are the three changes you would make in time?
I think for me, the most important thing is to develop a research culture, right? In this country, somehow we have not respected research. We have been a trading country. We have not come out with innovative products. So we need to change our mindset, and we need not emphasize research only in doctoral programs and postgraduate programs. We also need to emphasize research in undergraduate programs. And that is one thing that I'm going to emphasize. The second thing is that at least 5% of institutional budget should be devoted for research. That is the first thing. The second thing is that we need to also give generalized and liberal education to students. The problem with many of my students, particularly in professional programs, have been that they have been so much concerned about technical skills that they don't understand the basic purpose of education. Not only students, even sometimes faculty don't understand the general purpose of education. So we need to focus on the deep objectives of the education. And thirdly, we need to enrich our labs. We need to invest in technology, and we need to invest in internationalization.
Excellent. In fact, I'm a votary of we should have a third-party referencing or an external referencing, because when we have the external benchmarks, we can achieve a little better and we have something to look up to. If we are our own benchmark, then probably the progress doesn't happen. Rahul, I'm getting back to you. Let me ask you, you have seen the both worlds, in students and faculty outside India and inside. How do you see that? What is the key differences that you notice and how you're trying to address them in the present, and how you think they should do in terms of moving forward?
Well, the most stark difference is that again the education system has become OBE, an outcome-based education system, which means end output, which is a job. Now, this is, as Dr. Anup rightly mentioned, is the grown approach to education system, not comprehending what education is really about. If you're simply enrolling a degree with the simple outcome of obtaining a job, ultimately the whole progress and the process is lost in between. So that is something which is a huge stark difference from the, we can say, the European context of education versus the Indian context of education. Another aspect which was mentioned as well, the research part. As you know, research is critical in all fields. So if research is not emphasized and it is not really incentivized accordingly, and by incentivized, I mean financially incentivized by the institutions, ultimately the research culture and quality will decrease consistently. And this will lead to a loss, of course, of industry connect, because ultimately you will not be able to approach or pitch those industries in any way, nothing attractive to go for them. So that's something which I've noticed across the board, not just in India, but other countries as well, but especially in the Indian context, it has happened quite a lot. And then if we look at the internationalization part, the concept of internationalization has been taken wrongly. Internationalization does not mean to bring foreign campuses of foreign universities on their campuses in India, does not mean to bring foreign faculty. I mean, I'm throwing stones at my own house, but it does not mean to bring foreign faculty to India. It means that ultimately you're going to bring that culture of education, merge it with your education system, and somehow find this common ground where you can find improvement. So it's not that foreign faculty are better or worse than Indian faculty, and not the other way around. It's ultimately a fact of what kind of training they have received, what kind of upbringing, what kind of culture is there present in the particular country, and how they're moving about it. So internationalization is basically about sharing rather than replacing, which is what the NEP is trying to approach with. Bring foreign universities, Ivy League universities into the Indian subcontinent, and then of course you will increase the competition with Indian universities, which is not going to lead to anything.
Thank you. Building on that, Sanjay, think of both research, like Anup said, internationalization, like Rahul said. How do these things measure up in the case of Ahmedabad, thinking of future? Let me also ask you, in the light of the same experience, we read in India books written by professors from overseas. By and large, most higher education of any quality includes that, except in social sciences, which is very localized. In the case of management, also books come from overseas. I would like to see some books from Ahmedabad faculty or IIM faculty or Indian faculty to be seen in the global market in America. Now, you can't say that books are not available, they all go on Amazon anyway. So marketplace is the same. So why is it that institutional professors from IIM Ahmedabad, their books are not read overseas? So three things: research, internationalization, and what is it that we should measure in terms of global context, why do we not get our books read by people outside?
Okay, so let me take each of the points as far as IIM Ahmedabad is concerned. So in last decade or so, IIM Ahmedabad also increased its emphasis on research, as most of the institutions have. And the results are very open. We are getting good number of publications in North American journals. So that has been successful, yet it's not picked up the steam that I think anyone and everyone would have expected. It's slow, but it's coming up. And the reason is that research doesn't happen, individually these days. You have to create an ecosystem. And unfortunately, that creating that ecosystems take a lot of time. Not only when I talk of ecosystems, which it means a networking. Sitting in India, maybe it may not be sufficient that you can do research and you can publish. You have to work along with people in Europe, faculty in Europe or in America and other places where you can put your ideas together and see the opportunities of publications. So it's happening, albeit it's a bit slow. At IIM Ahmedabad, we do not find the problem of using books by foreign authors because the pedagogy here is largely case-based. And therefore, we don't use books that often. In cases, I can say with ease that 60% of the cases, though I don't have statistics, but I use many more, 80%. On average, we use 60% of the cases written by our own faculty. And therefore, we don't face the problems that we are using American books. We are teaching using cases. Books usually bring to classrooms things which have been written 4 or 5 years ago. Cases are fresh, and with cases, we give them the recent papers that have been published, maybe in some of the journals or magazines. So therefore, we try to keep on the latest front, and therefore, the problem of book doesn't come. Coming up on the third issue of writing books such that they get used in US. Now, there is some problem that I see. And I'm coming from the perspective of management, and maybe engineering also it may be true, and other fields I am not much aware about that. Now, look at most of the organizations which have headquarters in US. Most of the companies will have headquarters in US. For example, let's talk about Samsung, maybe not Samsung, most of the companies, IBM and so on and so forth. Now, the access of the faculty in Harvard or Stanford, which they have with the industry, we don't have the same access. I will never be able to approach the companies that have headquarters in US. Leave alone that, I have written cases and I've tried to write cases with many Indian organizations. I find that access is easily available to faculty from other countries, especially America, but not to the Indian institutions. I think industry has to open up to Indian institutions also, and that will help us to become global. We also need to learn from somewhere, and that experience we should have. And as Dr. Rahul was mentioning, therefore, it's very important that we establish a good connect between academics and industry. That will help us to write books that are more practical in nature.
Thank you. Anup, I'm getting back to you. What is it that will indicate to you, some indicators, maybe just 2, 3, that you have actually become world class, whether you are in FT index or not, doesn't matter, that you have become world class? What will give the signal to you, or what signal shall we use to believe that you are world class? 3 of them.
Well, first thing is, what is your faculty-student ratio?
Okay.
That is most important. If your faculty-student ratio is 1 to 10, then you are close to world class. And second is, what is your research productivity per faculty? So if you are publishing 2 good papers every year per faculty, that is another indication. And third is that how many of your students are going to research organizations, and how many of them are starting their own organizations, startups. So that would be another indicator. So faculty student ratio, and then research productivity, perfectivity, and third is the proportions of students going for entrepreneurship and startup.
That's great because you've already given a signal of the kind of institution you're going to build. And if you take your criteria today, given 1,000 universities, what percentage actually will come close to that benchmark that you were creating?
I would say that not even 1%, because in most of the institutions, including IITs and IIMs, faculty-student ratio is not even 1 to 10. Maybe there may be 1 or 2 institutions where it is, but for most of them, it is not there. And teaching load is very high in Indian educational institutions. So as a result, research productivity is less. And this whole wave of entrepreneurship and innovation is hardly about 5 years old. We had entrepreneurship, but not the entrepreneurship for industry 4.0. So that is something new. So we have to catch up and we have to face the stark reality.
Okay, great. And I'm asking Rahul. Rahul, you see from a totally different perspective. Responding to Anup, how would you see his points being, in some ways incorporated in the old institution, Voxel?
Well, I agree with the research output and the importance of it. Now, research output has two variables. One is whether you're going to publish for the sake of publishing, or whether means number crunching, or whether you are going to really publish with a quality output, meaning certain journals indexed by certain categories, namely ABDC, Scopus, and so on. FT50 kind of journals. So if it's that the output or is an industry output, well and good, there is a valuable qualitative amount of research. Otherwise, what is happening in most institutions is that there is a publication by count. The more papers, the better, but that also decreases the quality output. So there has to be a balance. That is one thing. Second thing is the tech-driven implementation across programs. Most, especially Indian universities, lack technological, not infrastructure, so to say, but the well-awareness of what to implement where. For example, if you look at online teaching, which has been going on for now 8 months approximately, there were multiple tools such as virtual reality or augmented reality which could have been used. But many hesitated to use it because that implies that you have to learn. And you have to teach the faculty also, and you have to conduct FDPs and so on and so forth. So it takes a larger amount of investments beyond the actual infrastructure. And that hesitation, I have noticed it across institutions, and it calls my attention a lot because you will need to really embrace it at some point. There is no escape from it. And you have to really trigger it even now or later. If it's not in this pandemic, it will be in the next. So it's going to happen at some point. And third point will be this multidisciplinary approach. Now, there are subjects such as psychology or sociology or even anthropology or philosophy for that matter that have been forgotten, left apart. For those who really are not good at anything else that pursue this kind of degrees. That is the general perception, which is completely incorrect. We are talking about artificial intelligence, for example, or machine learning, but we don't comprehend human intelligence, which derives from psychology and philosophy. So ultimately, it drives me to the question of why? Why are we doing this? Ultimately, we are eradicating the base and jumping directly into the next top notch. So these three aspects, I believe, are the ones to be really embraced in the coming future.
Thank you. Sanjay, once I asked a major CEO of India's large corporate environment, technology companies who were sitting on my left on the panel about technology, he said, no one can teach us anything about technology in the world. And I was totally shocked. So I said, well, I hate to disagree with my famous colleague here on the panel, but I would say that in terms of technology, we remain at the level of using iPhone. When technology being created, the level of imagining iPhone, and 7 generations later we end up using it. That gap, how do you think we are going to bridge that gap with our education system? By changing the thinking, how would you do that?
Sorry. As Dr. Rahul has mentioned, we have been using, and all of us are aware, we have been using technology for last 8 months or so. But I think that's just 10% of what technology can do. If you see last 1 or 2 years or so, so many online courses are coming up, like Udemy and so many different platforms. If you are talking of learning some programming skills or some very basic things such as statistics, which is routine, I appreciate you can go there and maybe hundreds of students can learn there. But is education all about that? Is education not about how to inculcate different ways of thinking, how to work with different viewpoints? It's about interaction amongst faculty and students. Now we are not using technology to that extent, to that level. And I feel that as faculty and as institutions, we have to come up with very different ways of use of technology, where we can explain whatever we could have done in classroom with the help of expressions, with the help of experience, and everything else that comes in classroom. Other than that, actually using technology, we can build both. We can build experiences of classroom as well as whatever we don't get in classroom. For example, today when I'm teaching online, it becomes easy for me to bring guests to the classroom, which was very difficult. I can't invite each and every person to Ahmedabad to take to deliver a talk in a course. But now I can request them that why don't you come for 15 minutes, why don't you come for half an hour or so and join my class. Now technology makes that possible. But the interaction, the discussions, that's where we should make use of technology with the help of augmented reality. Maybe then our students will learn much more than what we are doing right now. Therefore, I think we should develop much better applications as of now. That's what I see.
Thank you. Anup, think of it this way: investment in education. I used to see at one time that the $10,000 per annum average for school education in America used to become about $30,000 in college education. At that level, you were able to get a certain quality of education, which was for some world class, for some, the next year, but more or less create an ecosystem which keeps American engine running. If we had to create that level of quality in India, what kind of investment will be required in terms of per student or per faculty, whatever metrics you like to use, if you can share that with us?
Well, I can share with you that to create an IIT, we require at least an investment of 2,000 crores. And to create an IM, we require an investment of 500 crores. When we see private institutions, nobody is going to invest more than 40, 50 crores. And that's where there is a big lacuna. So what we require two kind of investment. One is initial investment, and once these institutions are created, then we need to have reasonable fee, right? And that would be, I think 10% of what American universities are charging, not more than that, right? So we require investment at these two steps. And we have to go for a long journey, and it is not being done. And one point that I'd like to add, that many of these top institutions would be coming from central government. We should not have high hopes from state governments and private sector.
Okay. No, thank you very much. So I think the 2,000 for IIT crores for IIT, 500 crores for IIMs. From that point of view, how many institutions in India and private sector will be able to measure up to the standard set by the original 3 IIMs or the original 3 IIT or 5 IITs?
Well, see, there are almost 400 private institutions in India, and I don't think more than 4 or 5 of them can match them. So others would be at the middle of the pyramid or bottom of the pyramid. So only a few of them, negligible, would be able to reach top of the pyramid.
Given the new NEP, do you see something happening from here that we can take out, which would help us get there?
Well, what government is saying that they would not differentiate between private and public institutions so far research funding is concerned, and that is good news. The second thing is that the norms and standards which government is going to set, they would be exactly the same for public and private institution. And third thing is that different governments would also give at least some grant for technology upgradation. So these are the three things which are good, but let's see that how do they unfold.
Rahul, just building on that point, what is from your point of view, a good level of investment to achieve some global benchmark for India?
There are mainly two. One is critically and very urgently research, quality research, and of course, ultimately will be the technological implementation. If these two happen successfully and the government, state as well as the central government invest adequately, internationalization, as defined earlier, will not be an issue whatsoever. And ultimately, the improvement and fame and the reputation of this institution will also grow consequently. However, if we rely only on an outcome, education-based outcome, and ultimately we just rely on placements and we rely on low-quality research, nothing fruitful will come out of it. I don't know how much to emphasize on research. I might sound repetitive ultimately, but I have seen across the board how important this feature becomes. And if it really is not emphasized, it can lead to multiple consequences, not just in India, but I've seen it in other countries as well. It really, really plays a very critical key role.
Sanjay, when I went to do my MBA, which was basically a Sloan and SIAD combined program for executives, the dean of Sloan School said, I would assess the success of my program based on the fact that nobody who came here goes back to their jobs, and how many people become entrepreneurs rather than how many go into job situations. Two indices. How many will go back to their jobs? Fewer go is the better. And how many become non-executive and become entrepreneur? More that happens, the better. Those two indices. Do you have any such thing in terms of Ahmedabad framework? Or if you don't have, in light of NEP, what do you think should be the way India should be looking at?
I think we are far away from that kind of goal. And one of the reason is that education at this time is very costly. Most of the students that come to IIM Ahmedabad are from middle income group. They are not super rich. I think if they were super rich, they won't come even to IIM Ahmedabad. They would get admission somehow in US universities or Europe maybe. So we are getting people largely who can't either afford or they can't get a loan, or maybe some of them may not get admission also, but they are very, very few. Now, if you take a loan of around 30 lakh rupees, for 2 years, maybe plus minus few lakhs, your first requirement is to repay that. And there are some entrepreneurs from IIM Ahmedabad who I interact with, and they are successful. I know their life for first 5 years. They came to me. There is a boy and a girl who started one venture in Sikkim in Northeast. They are growing organic turmeric, and they have been felicitated by Prime Minister and so on and so forth. But their frustration, it took them 5 to 6 years to get something meaningful. Now somehow they were able to manage. They could hold on. They were about to give up, but somehow something ensured that. But large number of people will get frustrated, and that frustration means that they will go back, and there are many of them who go back to job. Therefore, I think somehow the cost of education has to come down if we have to see more entrepreneurs. Or our systems, our bureaucratic systems have to be simple so that if someone wants to be an entrepreneur, there are not many roadblocks for them. At this juncture, there are so many roadblocks if you go and do something on your own that people get frustrated. So one or other or both of them, that's what should happen. That's what I think.
Okay. I know my generation, when we went to schools, and I'm including up to the generation of Sundar Pichai and Tatel Rela, we actually studied on an average in 200 rupees a month, which effectively was about $40 a month. You're looking at $500 a year. And that created in IITs and IIMs and other institutions the quality of people who could go out, and if they experienced themselves in a new setting, which was in America or Europe, wherever they went, learning happened because the experiences you had that was built on the foundation created by the Indian environment. So India created a good foundation. But from foundation to launch was a big challenge. So you could launch yourself by getting into a new experiential zone, which had experienced 6-7 generations ahead of progress of the world you left behind. From that point of view, when you're looking at from Nirma, if you imagine the future, do you have some goals along those lines? Number one, how can we help them go at the lowest possible investment from the kind of experience they have in the marketplace here to where the world is at the cutting edge? How do you transition that experience at the lowest possible investment point?
We need to realize that now the number of students going to higher education is very high, and there is no way that government can accommodate all these students, and many of them will have to go to private institutions where they have to pay the tuition fees. However, it is responsibility of good private institutions to see to it that at least the fees of 20% students is subsidized. And that's what we are doing in Nirma, that 20% of our students get a scholarship. And those students who have some unique family problems or some unique difficulty, we see to it that not only their fee is reduced, we also give them some money so that they can afford their lodging and boarding. And that is the way forward.
Okay. Rahul, in your institution, what is the ratio of people who are supported by your institution, the scholarship and livelihood both?
Percentage-wise, it will be difficult to say because we have multiple categories. We have one for women, we have other for single parents, we have others for high profiles in terms of sports persons who have competed at national or international level. So I could say roughly, without data in hand right now, approximately some 12 to 15% get a scholarship based on various categories and different merits, either academic or otherwise, or just personal. So that's normally the ratio. Yeah.
Thank you. Sanjay, recently I was talking to a few former education secretaries of India about what should be done in the light of NEP. And they said, look, only thing which is happening lately in India from an investment point of view is looking at the testing mechanisms, how to prepare students for testing, right? So it was like saying, basically, I don't prepare the students for learning and knowledge, I only prepare them for testing. How do you respond to that? And these are former secretaries, and not just one, 3-4 of them, of Education of India, all of India, Union Secretaries of India. They're thinking like that. How do you respond to that?
You mean coaching? By testing, you mean coaching for
the coaching.
Yeah. Exactly. I think the kind of money that IMA gets as fee, or maybe Nirma gets, more money is made by these testing or coaching institutions. Very honestly, that's what is my guess.
Yes, yes.
It just reflects one simple problem. There are too few good institutions, too few seats, and too many candidates. Very, very demand supply. It's nothing more than that. And that is happening, obviously, because they're not good institutions. Why we don't have good institutions? Because we don't have good faculty. So the only way to break that deadlock is to come up with great institutions for which we require good faculty. And if you see today, if you ask a child, if you ask a first-class child what you want to be, the child would say, I want to be a teacher. because the child finds teachers, they have affinity towards their teacher in class 1 and class 2. By class 6, I think they start disassociating. By class 12th, they would hate their teachers. In college, no one wants to be a teacher. It's not a profession that, not no many, but many of them, means I of course, yeah, not many of them want to be, and that's,
Okay.
it's not a, it's, people.
Okay, I'm opening up a simple question. In the light of NEP, will India move from coaching or training to learning environment, and how long will it take us? And I'm opening it to all. Start with Sanoop.
Well, old habits die hard. So as Professor Verma was telling, that as long as there are a few good institutions and there is a very fierce competition to get admission into them, uh, fighting these institutions will be very, very difficult. However, once they have come in the institution, we can create a good learning environment. So we need to do three things, which we are trying to do in my institution. First thing is that we need to reduce time in the class. One problem of Indian education system has been that our students are in a classroom for a long time, and as a result, their time for experiential learning is less. The second thing is that we need to involve our doctoral students into teaching, okay? Because there is a need for mentoring and coaching even in universities, and senior professors don't have time for that. So if we involve our doctoral students in teaching, that would become easy. And the third thing is that we need to emphasize the social aspect of learning. Somehow, we have been focusing more on individual learning, while learning is a social process. So we need to create group learning. We need to create communities of learning so that students learn more from each other.
Thank you. I don't know how many of you know, there are 10 minutes to go as now I'm told by Saloni. I don't know how many of you know that there is more value created or money earned by coaching students to join IITs and IIMs than by those who pass out of IIMs and IITs in any given year or lifetime. There's something odd about it, that there's more money made in coaching the students to join IITs and IIMs than by those who join IITs and IIMs in their lifetime. So that's something very interesting to worry about. But the point is, to become a nation that changes its approach from coaching to thinking to learning is not a small thing. In the 70 years, we have only one round of institutional change of quality IITs and IIMs in the 60s. And like you said, there are hardly a few institutions today that you will count in that scale today. So even in 70 years, we've added 3 or 4. Listening to Dr. Noor saying that how long will it take us to prepare, become a nation that can educate 1.5 billion people who will become legitimate, you can say, demographic dividend candidates for India for the next 20, 25 years? Because as of now, demographic dividend means that we can only offer our people who can earn 10, 20,000 rupees a month to the world, and the world doesn't need them. So demographic dividend is actually just a word which has no meaning, because people who could be paying dividends, they're needed in India, who will pay at the Indian levels, and those who go overseas, they're lost to the rest of the world. They don't contribute to India from that point of view, right? So if 90% people are operating at $2,000 productivity annual, is there a demographic dividend? Putting it all together in a simple word, how do you go from coaching and here and now to learning and future culture? Rahul and Sanjay again. First Rahul and then Sanjay.
That's a tricky question, which I don't have any data or facts to back by answer, but I can tell you what we are trying to do, at least from my end, as Anup rightly mentioned, getting students less time in the classroom and more involved, that can also avoid these teaching institutes somewhere or the other. On our end, what I emphasize upon on UG as well as PG programs is to make valuable, remarkable, and meritorious students teaching assistants, which is a concept which is only applicable normally by PhD students. We have implemented across the board. So this helps them get that hands-on experience at first, even from UG, talking about BBA, BCom kind of level, and they get the experience of how exactly it feels like to become a faculty or how it feels like to assist a faculty member. And somewhere on the way, they learn by themselves without the need of having any external learning, such as coaching, for example. And another aspect would be, which I feel is very critical, which is ongoing in many institutions, is life projects. This partnering within the industry with a company and doing a live project with them and assessing the students based on that for 2-3 months and giving them a competition-based approach. This can also help them keep them busy, make them learn with practicality, with experiential learning. And ultimately, if you offer experiential learning somewhere or the other, that coaching concept hopefully will die slowly and progressively, but it will take time, of course, since it's very ingrained into the Indian scenario. But the only way to eradicate it is to make students more involved and, of course, to getting involved with industry too. That is the way to go about it, in my opinion.
Sanjay, okay, Tariq, you want to ask him something? Tariq wants to ask some questions to all of us. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you for. I can ask something because there are some questions coming in, but also I have been reminded quite strongly by our dear Hazel and Saloni. Time is running out, so if I may, I will read out a couple of questions and just one comment that I've been following, very interesting, and it's a big subject. Somebody asked, will machines replace teachers or automation replace teachers? And they said, no, it won't happen, but teachers who understand and use machines will replace the teachers who do not, right? And the big thing here is, as an entrepreneur, I see huge opportunities, not for teaching kids, but teaching the faculty. There are so many opportunities in how you get them to learn. Like even I screw up Zoom buttons every time, and that's basic, but use the power of these things, you see? So there are so many opportunities, but let me come to the question. One was asked, can you comment on humanities and social sciences, particularly in higher education? Satish, you direct that to the right person.
Okay, I leave it to the panelists. Go ahead. Anyone? Anup? Anup?
You're on silent.
Sanjay, go ahead. You pick it up.
Yeah, I think, and I agree, these subjects are also very important. Let me bring one experience out and share that. If I want someone who can communicate really well and document a case study, I don't get a right person. There are thousands of students who have passed out, they are unemployed, but to get one good person is very difficult because most of them are engineers who have been trained to think in a particular way, but they can't communicate that well. They can't relate it to other social issues. So I think, as Tariq, the question says, it is very important for our nation to get not only produce engineers and maybe doctors, maybe or MBAs, but also people who understand other aspects of life, because as far as I come from management, it applies to all fields of life. It applies to society. Therefore, people have to understand anthropology. They have to understand sociology. They have to understand politics. They have to understand law. And importance of all these disciplines should not be forgotten at all costs. But however, unfortunately, we are working only in one dimension, engineering, and of late, I think law has also picked up. So I agree with the question.
Okay, the next one is, by which year do you think the new NEP actually be implemented? And I will add my own little piece to this, and maybe Anup, Dr. Anup, you would like to comment. Professor Sanjay just said humanities and social sciences have to be there. Are they specifically referenced within the NEP document, and by when do you think it could actually be implemented?
Well, the perspective is of 20 years. If someone goes to the school from the next year, and when he completes his whole higher education, the education policy should be fully implemented by that time. So to be very brief, the perspective is of 20 years.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Tariq.
Well, I do not see any more questions, and I think timing-wise, we've gone over a little bit, but it's been very educational. Satish, would you like to make some final comments and thank our guests directly as you know them?
Of course, yes. One last question I would ask each one of you, and same question to all of you. If you had no resource constraint, what's one decision that you will take that will change the trajectory of India's higher education? You have no resource constraint, just think of one thing you would do.
Well, I would like to improve faculty qualification and faculty competence, because the fulcrum is faculty.
Okay. Okay. Sanjay.
Improve school education.
Okay. Rahul.
Yeah.
I agree with Sanjay. School education is the base. Then from there we move on.
Thank you very much. I would like to say my perspective very quickly is that we cannot build a World Trade Center on the foundation of a hut. We need to first create the foundation on which we can create the dreams of learning, etc. And our school education system is really broken. Not more than 1 or 2% children, they end up experiencing the world they could experience today. So 90+% have basically education which is still geared to literacy. Yesterday, I spoke to someone who is president of a very large literacy organization, and he talks about literacy in 2020. I said, if you learn all the alphabets and all the numbers, how far will you go today? And then he said, well, you have to start somewhere. I said, 70 years later, starting there seems like starting a little too late. That said, we start from where we are, and I hope NEP somehow triggers that conversation and changes the way we look at education and higher education, school education. And that's a sincere hope that I have. I don't know if it's changing anything beyond people saying it's a good policy document, and then they stop after that. That conversation somehow has to begin changing. But thank you, everyone. Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Tariq, for the opportunity. And Dr. Singh, it's been very nice to listen to you, Dr. Sanjay Verma and Rahul. Wonderful to meet you all, and I hope everybody took something from it. And I surely really looked at all these questions and helped understand a few things better. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.